been 4 long years since legendary video game auteur Hideo Kojima left Konami, leaving behind a career that spanned over 20 years and multiple critically acclaimed video games. This departure came with an allegedly intense breakup between Kojima and the higher-ups at Konami. After the cancellation of the collaborative title, Silent Hills, and the launch of the unfinished and mostly disappointing MGS5 The Phantom Pain, video game fans were understandably upset at what was happening. Reports of Kojima Productions staff being mistreated by the rest of the company, and the director himself not being able to interact with his team during MGS5's development only fanned flames of anger from basically everyone in the video game community. A year after Kojima's exit from the company, fans were left wondering what this seasoned director would move on to next. They wouldn't have to wait very long though, with this somewhat speedy announcement that Kojima Productions would reform as an independent game dev under Sony. It really felt like Kojima-san foresaw the Konami breakup and planned accordingly. At E3 2016, we got our first look at the game Koji Pro was making, a title called Death Stranding. The reveal trailer showed off actor Norman Reedus naked on a beach with a tiny baby surrounded by beached whales and ghostly figures off in the distance. When I saw this, I was pretty hyped, but also, like everyone else, genuinely confused. As the years went on, we got more cryptic trailers that would explain more of what was happening, but not entirely giving up all of the title's secrets yet. As more and more baffling footage and big-name actor reveals hit news outlets, I'd get even more hyped. I love Mads Mikkelsen and Lea Seydoux. At TGS 2019, Kojima himself did a full gameplay presentation where we got to see a lot of actual real-time gameplay of Death Stranding. After checking out the hours of footage available to me, I wasn't super thrilled with what I had been watching. Everything shown seemed like an extreme delivery service simulator. Even though I wasn't really feeling this, the hype levels still remained, but they were admittedly dampened a bit. Whatever this game was going to be, it'd be interesting at the very least. A new IP by a well-known game director, funded by Sony, starring famous actors delivering outlandish and heady dialogue you'd only ever find in a Kojima game, sounds like a fantastic concoction for success in my opinion. I had lots of faith in Kojima going into this game. I'm a big fan of his previous works, and now that he and most of his team were free from creative and budgetary restrictions set by a company like Konami, I imagine this would be a true Hideo Kojima game. Well everyone, Death Stranding is out. It's getting some interesting reviews. I've played through the entire game, and I have much to say about it. So let's not waste any more time. Let's connect over Death Stranding. In Death Stranding, you play as Sam Bridges, a man making deliveries as a porter in a post-apocalyptic America. After a catastrophic event known as the Death Stranding occurs, humanity is faced with extinction. When one of Sam's jobs goes horribly wrong, he's left with a strange biological device known as a BB that can detect mysterious ghost-like creatures. It's up to Sam to travel west, reconnecting the remaining cities and settlements of America to something called the Chiral Network, in the hopes of reconnecting the country and making everything whole again. As a porter of Bridges, your main objectives alongside reconnecting America is making deliveries. The gameplay loop of Death Stranding is delivering cargo to clients across the country. Traversal is the name of the game here. On foot, Sam controls very well. The movement stick is incredibly accurate and responsive. You can jump, climb, and crouch down. Once you accept an order, you'll have to set up your inventory with various equipment, like ladders that help you climb up and get across dangerous terrain, and anchors that help you get down from high places. It's weird to say, but one of this title's main gameplay mechanics is encumbrance, something most people never want to deal with in a video game. Loading up cargo on Sam's back or strapping pieces to his arms and legs is very important for setting up a stable, light load as you travel to your destinations. Both main and side jobs play effectively the same in the sense that you're delivering things, but side quests usually require you to complete your delivery while taking on certain challenges, like keeping your cargo's durability high, stacking it in a certain way, or having to deliver in a timely fashion. The world of Death Stranding is especially dangerous, no matter what type of job you're on. One wrong step while carrying a backpack full of cargo can throw Sam off balance quite easily. While empty-handed, Sam's left and right hands are mapped to both the left and right triggers. Holding either button down makes Sam hold his backpack straps and helps him balance when you're tipping over. Holding down both triggers stabilizes your movement but also slows you down at the same time. You'll have to think about about stabilizing yourself at the right times while moving over certain terrain. Which, by the way, every single part of the environment is interactable. So if you see a particularly large rock or bump in the road, stepping over it the wrong way will likely make Sam lose his balance. Using the Odra deck, Sam's shoulder-mounted scanning device, you can see what parts of the ground in front of you are safe to walk and climb over. It's insane how the smallest rock can completely throw you off. It must have taken forever to program this giant open world like this. This is something we've never really seen before in a game. The act of walking in most games isn't even a thing people have to think about. Literally every single part of the game world matters from a traversal perspective. It can be frustrating at the beginning of the game when you're trying to figure all of this stuff out and you just want to move forward, but once you have a grasp of the controls, you'll be moving up and down hills and other rocky terrain like a true explorer. As you discover new places and connect settlements to the chiral network, the world will begin populating with items left behind by other players. These items include things like ladders and anchors to get around, or even things like vehicles that dramatically speed up your deliveries. You'll also find items like weapons and equipment that you can use in combat, but we'll talk about that later. Everything you leave behind in the world will also show up in other players' games as well. When using another player's item, like a ladder for example, you can leave likes on that piece of equipment like a social networking site. This helps show other players how useful that specific piece of equipment is, and also it's just really nice. You can mash out likes on a single item until its like timer runs out. So if something really helped you get out of a bind or over a tricky obstacle, make sure to show your appreciation by actually smashing that like button. Aside from finding smaller things left behind by other players, you can find and build larger structures like bridges, full-on highways, safe houses, and later on, zip lines that cover massive stretches of land. Large structures start with their foundations and have to be built up over time. The fun part is that everyone can actually chip in with the construction of these larger things, so it benefits everyone to donate a little bit of their time and resources to get these giant time-saving structures built faster. By the way, this also goes for maintaining and upgrading all of the player-built structures as well. It's really cool and emphasizes this game's community aspect. Seeing that little pop-up in the corner of the screen saying someone used an item you placed in the world is really awesome. It feels amazing knowing that you helped someone get through something difficult. You actively aided in and made someone else's adventure a little easier. This game is literally teamwork makes the dream work. You can play offline, but these helpful items won't be there for you. You'll have to build everything yourself. It's like playing on an extreme hard difficulty setting. Death Stranding by no means is a survival game, but it does feature a few survival-type gameplay elements to keep you on your toes while you're out in the field. As you trek through the barren wastelands of America, you will have to keep an eye on Sam's stamina meter. If you're out in the field for too long, Sam's overall stamina will decrease. You'll have to retreat to a private room to rest up. In the private rooms, you can listen to music and relax. How about taking a shower? You can even use the bathroom and collect your waste and use it as a weapon out in the field. I'm not making this up. There are pee-pee and poo-poo grenades in this game. That's not even the weirdest thing though. The strangest thing is that you can drink some fresh Monster Energy as you relax. I guess this one energy drink brand survived the apocalypse. Drinking Monster actually increases your overall stamina meter, so kicking back and downing a few cans is important for effective journeys. You know, just down 3 cans back to back. You won't die or anything. Out in the wild, Sam's boots will also wear down, and you'll have to change them out for a fresh pair when the time comes. Walking around barefoot on rocky terrain is a no-no, so make sure to pack a few extra pairs before you head out. This game is so weird, but I love it.
Immediate administration to the president.
Hey Sam, good to see you back on Bridges' side. I know it's really tough what you've been going through recently. We've all been having a rough time now that President Strand is gone. And Amelie, promise me that you'll find her, Sam. Anyway, I didn't call you to make you feel bad. I just wanted to let you know, now that the chiral network is coming back online thanks to your efforts, I think it's time you make yourself a new website. Private contracts and all, right? With Squarespace, you can easily do this in a fun and accessible way. On Squarespace, you can create your own website by selecting one of the many fully customizable templates. You can easily create a site about whatever you want. Want to create a personal blog or sell a product or something special like your own art? Well, there are resources for that right on Squarespace. No additional off-site plugins required. It's really convenient. By the way, Sam, I finally added the first character to my site's survival horror heroine section. The first lady is none other than Jill Valentine. I'd love for you to leave a comment down below letting me know who should be next. I'll give a shout out to the person whose suggestion I choose in my next video. Squarespace is not only extremely useful for creating websites quickly and effectively, but it can be really fun showing off your creative side with your website. The best part about all of this is that Squarespace is offering my viewers 10% off on their first purchase. When you're ready to get started, just go to squarespace.com/thespherehunter or click the link in the description to sign up and start building your online presence. That's squarespace.com/thespherehunter to get started today. You got that, Sam? I know you're not the most creative person, but having your own site is really good for your business. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Maybe we can finally watch that one zombie show you like so much when you get off work. While out on deliveries, Sam will run into a human enemy faction known as the Mules. Mules are an actual cargo cult, driven insane by the lack of likes on their creations. These mad porters roam the wastes of America, looking for cargo to steal. They don't care what it is they're stealing. Just the symbol of cargo is enough to satisfy them. Mule encounters are pretty standard experiences. You can either take them head-on or sneak around them. Mules, from a gameplay perspective, function in two different ways. They'll either try tracking you down, scanning for any nearby cargo, or you'll just run into them while you're out on a delivery. Some orders run through or past mule camps, so there isn't really a way to completely avoid these guys, because they're always going to be out searching for stuff. Mules are kind of easy in the early game. You can sneak up behind them and tie them up with your rope. If you're discovered, you can fight them with punches and kicks, or if you have any of the various guns at your disposal, you can take them down that way very quickly. The bola gun wraps up mules from a distance, temporarily incapacitating them quietly. You'll have to get close to them and knock them out once they're wrapped up on the ground. When you get any of the non-lethal firearms, mules don't really stand a chance unless they're all rushing you at once. At the start of the game, sneaking around the mules felt really cool. It was a fairly MGS feeling, if you know what I mean. Sneaking through one of their camps and stealing back an item you need from one of your orders is really fun. I'd say at the halfway point, mule encounters can get a little repetitive and samey. I actually found myself running from them a lot of the time at this point in the game. In the late game chapters, mules do upgrade themselves and pose more of a threat, encouraging more straightforward gun battles. And this is when I started really enjoying these encounters the most. The game suddenly went from a delivery sim to Uncharted, but you know, without killing thousands of people. Mules will chase you down to the ends of the earth if it means getting your cargo, but even they're smart enough to stay out of the rain. And wherever there's rain, that means there are BTs. BTs, or beached things, are ghostly entities that haunt the timefall-drenched areas of America. The rain in this world is called timefall, a substance that ages anything it touches. That means the cargo you're carrying and human life. It's legit terrifying. While traversing the timefall, BTs will be littered throughout the landscape, staying still for the most part. To the average person, BTs are completely invisible, but Sam has something called dooms, a rare condition where one can sense the presence of a BT. Standing still reveals these creatures' locations, but once you move, they fade away again. With BB, you can sense BT positions via the flapping arm of the Odredex scanner. You can either sneak by BTs or take them out by using blood-based weapons. So Sam's Doom's encoded blood also damages BTs. You can use blood weapons like hematic grenades and assault rifles and pistols loaded with blood-coated rounds. You'll have to be careful though when using blood rounds because each shot fired drains some of Sam's vitality. So there's a real balance to BT encounters. During these sequences, I would mostly sneak around, but then take out the ones I couldn't easily get past with blood weapons. These encounters were my favorite part of the gameplay. They felt very survival horror, with how you have to balance your defensive resources and choose when to use stealth to get by undetected. These parts were always fun for me. By the way, if a BT spots you, it'll send a gang of oily ground ghosts to grab and drag you into a mini-boss encounter. All of the BT mini-bosses are oily nightmare versions of real-life animals. I thought the mini-bosses were kind of easy for most of the game, mainly because they're gigantic and their attacks have these big wind-up animations that you can easily avoid. In the later parts of the game, these battles become much more difficult though, but sadly for most of the title, these fights can be avoided simply by running away. The mini-boss arenas are awesome though. The oil protruding from the ground summons up random environmental objects from the past, like buildings and cars to block your escape. If you're looking to take these monsters down, you can actually use these obstacles in your favor. Climbing up buildings to gain the high ground and using cars for cover can vary up these fights quite a bit should you choose to take them on. I really liked the BTs. I know, no surprise, coming from the Scary Video Game channel. Other than mules and BTs, at certain points in the game, Sam will find himself washing up on the shores of long, forgotten battlefields. These sections of the game are purely combat focused, literally shifting the gameplay to a third-person shooter style. Like, really, there are places to take cover and healing items and firearms are scattered all throughout the environment. I don't want to talk too much about this stuff in particular because it is story-focused, but I thought it was worth mentioning to let you guys know that there are in fact combat-focused sequences in Death Stranding. So that's basically all of the gameplay content in Death Stranding. I actually really enjoyed this title's gameplay loop. Like I said earlier, most of the game is just delivering cargo from one place to another, with the occasional combat encounter and very long Kojima cutscene to mix things up a bit. The game is very meditative at times. I went from one job to the other completely immersed in what I was doing for most of my playthrough. With that being said, this game has a lot of small problems. This title is littered with repetitive cutscenes of Sam putting cargo in mailboxes, repairing structures, taking off his Cupid and activating station terminals, and many, many more of these shorter animations. All of these repetitive cutscenes are skippable, thankfully, but they still require you to pause the game and hit the skip button to get through. I started to notice all of this pretty early on, and it did take me out of that meditative state for a while until skipping stuff became part of the game's loop for me, and I fell back into that flow state once again. Seriously, the shower animation is 4 separate short cutscenes. You have to pause and skip each of them every time if you don't want to see this happen. Like, why do I have to watch the Odra deck open whenever I enter BT territory? Just let it open as I play. No need to stop and show me this animation every single time. It's not great, but I get why all of this is here. And that's to better immerse you in Death Stranding's world. Kojima-san has said in various interviews that he wanted the player to feel like they were Sam the entire time, and that would come with the player having to shower and do all of those little animation things I mentioned. With this on top of some pretty basic delivery gameplay for the majority of the game's runtime, I can see a lot of people being turned off by Death Stranding. This game will not be for everyone, and this might sound weird, but at a certain point I thought to myself, this game might have too much content. You're getting your $60 worth out of this title for sure, but I think the main story might have one too many filler fetch quests, if you know what I mean. Like, there's this one part where you get to a new area of the world, and you have to do 2 deliveries for 3 separate people who are scattered across the map. This comes after a pretty big story event, and having to do this severely affected the game's pacing. Like, I just wanted to see what was going to happen next, but that was put on hold while I collected a few trinkets for some people. With that idea of pacing in mind, this game is around 40 to 50 hours long, depending on if you mainline the story or decide to take on side jobs. I mainlined the game for the most part, but even then, I still felt like I just played through 4 seasons of a TV show. Like, seriously. Once I got to Chapter 3 is when I started taking it slow and really immersed myself in the world. I'd say about half of the story quests could have been removed completely and nothing important would be lost. Shaving the game's runtime down to about 20 to 30 hours probably would have been ideal for keeping the story's progression moving at the perfect pace. Honestly, at a certain point, I was wondering if this game was for real. Was Kojima-san just trolling us, making a game where he stripped down the core video game experience to you just taking things from one place to another? That's what we do in most games after all, right? Getting from one place to another, stripped down to its bones. Thankfully, this isn't really the case, and as you keep playing, you unlock a lot of things that make traversal and combat a lot more fun. I really liked this title. It's got a lot of charm, and I absolutely love how you just play as a normal delivery man. Sam is not a hero. He can't take a ton of damage, he can't really fight that well hand to hand, and he kind of doesn't even want to get involved in the main conflict. At a lot of points in this title, I got some real Eco and Shadow of the Colossus vibes with its intentional isolation and loneliness. A lot of the jobs you could take can sometimes require up to 30 minutes of real time to complete. And while you're on the road, you are technically alone, but you can always feel the presence of your fellow players right beside you through their own creations and items left around the game world. It's so cool, and I wouldn't be surprised if more devs started implementing this kind of feature in their future titles. Just like every other Kojima production, Death Stranding is filled with tons of secrets and Easter eggs that you can probably make an entire video about. Like, did you know there are NPC porters that you'll randomly run into and can trade cargo with? How about if you hold down the circle button while Sam is idling, he'll sit down and you can actually sleep and massage your achy muscles. It was really fun stumbling across these things as I played, and it felt 100% Koji Pro. There are some genuinely awesome moments that I experienced during my playthrough as well, things that were only possible through this type of gameplay. On one occasion, I was sneaking through a BT-filled forest, narrowly escaping their clutches, only to activate part of the chiral network, turn back to the forest I had just crept through to see it repopulated with player items and bridges, giving me a much easier trip back from where I just was. How about transporting a weak person across the countryside, slipping while crossing a riverbed, only to drop my passenger downstream, then struggle to get her back at the last moment? I've never experienced anything like these events in other games before. Death Stranding, for how weird it is completely unique and unlike anything out right now. So gameplay aside, Death Stranding looks downright amazing. It's probably the best looking game on current-gen console hardware. Like many other titles from this year, this game uses photorealism for its world and characters. The main cast is made up of actors and directors that you've seen before, and they're all photo-scanned into the game using photogrammetry. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but photogrammetry is my favorite graphical style for modern games. It's awesome how we're finally at the level where we can achieve almost lifelike visuals in our games. I think this is the first game where the character models look exactly like their real-life counterparts. Sam is 100% Norman Reedus, down to even having his real-life tattoos. It's pretty mind-blowing. Like DMC5, Death Stranding has that familiar photorealistic anime aesthetic. And of course, a lot of Shinkawa style. There is some MGS DNA in this game's visuals. It's almost impossible not to get any MGS-looking things when Shinkawa is responsible for the art direction and mechanical designs. I absolutely love Sam's reverse trike and how it becomes a bike when in booster mode. Unlike Koji Pro's previous game, MGS5, Death Stranding's world is interesting and varied. If you were worried that this game's open world would suffer from MGS5's barren desert and jungle designs, worry not. You've got your desolate desert that totally looks like a Martian landscape, lush green forests and countrysides, beautiful city ruins, dangerous snow-capped mountains, and many more fully realized and lifelike locations. Death Stranding runs on the Decima engine, the same engine used on 2017's Horizon Zero Dawn. The developer of that title, Guerrilla Games, actually helped out on Death Stranding. Like I mentioned before, Sam's movement is very responsive and a lot of the time realistic. If you're running over rocky terrain, Sam will actually hop rock to rock. It looks great. But like basically every other open world game, there is open world jank present here. Animations can end up looking pretty wonky when stumbling around the environment, and controlling vehicles in tight spaces is pretty difficult. These are definitely quirks of the engine, and they don't detract from the overall experience, but when they happen, they're pretty noticeable. Death Stranding's sound design is perfect. Guns and weapons sound chunky and impactful when fired, and hearing gravel and terrain crunching under Sam's boots is all perfectly accurate to what you see on screen. And the music. My gosh, guys, don't even get me started on this game's music. Aside from an incredible selection of licensed tracks from artists like Low Roar, Silent Poets, and Churches, the game's original score, composed by Ludwig Forssell, is super good. All of his atmospheric tracks do an amazing job at easing you into the game world, and pieces like the ones that play during BT and Mule Encounters get your blood pumping while trying to escape these dire situations. During the main questline, when you reach certain points on the map is when a licensed piece of music will play. In these moments, the game really felt kind of like an art house video game or something. Each of these sequences came off very cinematic. Not only are they perfectly set up, but they also set my mind at ease as I reached my destination after a very long hike. I loved each of these moments so much. So the final thing we must talk about is the story for this game. Once again, if you were burned by the lack of story in MGS5, you have nothing to worry about here because this title has 7 hours of cutscenes. Every sequence is as Kojima as they can be. From characters explaining tiny details or historical events for 5 minutes straight, to outright awkward or bizarre moments popping up out of nowhere. Kojima's signature storytelling style is very much present in Death Stranding. The addition of screen actors and using other Hollywood personalities as the game's main cast may not be for everyone, but for whatever reason, it's like Kojima knew who all of my favorite actors were and put them in a game together. I love Norman Reedus as Sam. He brings an interesting yet familiar, reluctant, soon-to-be hero performance that also doubles as a good insert for the player. It's also funny how he's played by Norman Reedus, who is a natural, badass-looking cool guy, but Sam has a terrible phobia of being touched, so whenever anyone gets even a little close to him, he freaks out like a little kid. It's great. French actress Léa Seydoux plays Fragile, a fellow porter working for another transporting company, who has a very dark past and a higher form of dooms allowing her to see the BTs. I think Fragile had the most fleshed out character arc out of everyone in the cast. She's gone through a lot prior to the game's events and has sort of gained this unwanted reputation amongst the citizens of the various cities of America. And by the way, you do get to see that dark past, and it's pretty messed up. Mads Mikkelsen as Cliff is a mysterious figure, which I'm not going to talk about now because basically all of his story content happens mid to late game, and I'd consider all of it spoilers. One of the actors I wasn't super familiar with was Tommy Earl Jenkins as the amazingly named Die Hard Man. Die Hard Man is also very mysterious and seems to have ties to every main character in the game. He also gives you your main orders. He felt a lot like a Colonel Campbell type character, if you know what I mean. Tommy Earl Jenkins as this character gives it 1000%. Like, the story content through the late game with Die Hard Man gets very intense, and I was genuinely surprised while watching these scenes why this actor hasn't been in more mainstream projects. Seriously guys, he does an amazing job, but no spoilers. All of the other characters and performances are great too. The story itself can get a little convoluted at the start, and very strange with how things are presented, but surprisingly, everything does get explained, in Kojima fashion of course, and I found myself fully understanding what was going on with all of this title's crazy terminology, lore, and backstory. There is some truly terrifying stuff in this game. Obviously, living in a world where rain ages anything it touches is really bad for the progression of civilization and humanity as a whole. Seeing and hearing about what timefall has done to people in this world is really depressing. The opening cutscene of Sam's fellow porter aging rapidly in front of him and the other guy trying to stab himself to death before the BTs eat him is an absolute nightmare. Death Stranding actually has a bunch of harsh and upsetting imagery in some of its story sequences. There's one endgame scene that I'm very curious to see how people are going to react to. It gets really insane with a specific character death. I was like genuinely surprised that they rendered this in the game, and like no one's freaking out about it yet. I want all of you guys to go in blind if you decide to pick this game up for yourself, because exploring and discovering all of the insane mysteries of this world is very fun, and seeing all of it play out in over-the-top, insanely high-budget photorealistic cutscenes is a visual treat to behold. Death Stranding is a game that won't be for everyone. It's not at all what I was expecting from Kojima Productions. Honestly, I didn't even know what to expect based on those trailers, but I had fun with it. If you're willing to give it a shot, you'll be getting a surprisingly deep gameplay loop that requires a lot of patience, planning, and dedication out of its first few hours, that eventually blossoms into a much more satisfying gameplay experience for the rest of its runtime. This game has been such a mixed bag for people, and already a lot of online reviews have been very divisive. I think that's a very good thing though, because there hasn't ever been a game like this, and it's rocking everyone's world, whether that be in a positive or negative way. It's birthing some genuine discussion about what a video game is and what defines fun in this medium. I have a feeling we'll be talking about this game for years to come. It's safe to say that Sony and Koji Pro took a massive risk in making this game. It's a brand new million-dollar IP, but at its core it feels a lot like a high-budget indie game, and I think that's really awesome. The amount of heart and soul that went into this project is very apparent. Koji Pro is one of the most talented dev teams out there, and after playing through this game, I honestly can't wait to see what they put out next. According to reports, it seems like Kojima is actually going to tackle an on-screen film next, so very curious about that. But for now, I'll keep trucking.